guys, I hope you're all doing very well. Man, is it good to be back on YouTube now for the first time in like 4 months? In case you're wondering where I've been, I've basically just been trying to get in a routine. I've been trying to improve myself on a spiritual level, on a mental level, and just trying to in every way become the best version of myself so I can make that return to YouTube, and I'm back with a vengeance now, and it feels very good to be back. If you're new to my channel, welcome. I'm a spirituality themed vlogger or YouTuber, and my hopes for my channel is to share some of the knowledge in which I have acquired over the past couple of years due to many spiritual and even psychedelic experiences that I've been through, in which I believe can be used for the benefit of the mental and spiritual well-being of the general public. So in this video I'm going to be talking about something pretty personal. It's something that I haven't really openly talked about to too many people, and that is my personal subjective experience with Mary Jane, with good old marijuana. I want to talk to you guys about my journey with it from the beginning to the end. I want to talk about how it affected me on a spiritual level, and as well as why I probably don't see myself using marijuana anytime soon or possibly ever again. But before I do that, I just want to say that if you've watched my previous videos, you would know that I've portrayed myself sort of as this innocent, very kind, decent person. But the fact is that I have done pretty bad shit throughout my past, especially in the past like 3 years. And I've done things like cocaine, MDMA, LSD, you name it. I mean, I've done lots of mind-altering substances. But the one that stuck to me the most, and the one that intrigued me the most by far, and the one that I used the most by far, was marijuana. And the reason for that was really, it really stems back to my childhood. As a kid growing up, I experienced a lot of trauma as a kid, especially throughout my early years of primary school. I went to school for a long time with a bald head due to cancer that I had. I was bullied. I had very little friends. I pretty much had no social circle or anyone to be around. And there was just lots of events in my childhood that I feel like I wasn't able to like openly discuss or talk about to people. I felt like not many people would be able to relate to it. So I kept a lot of things inside me. And I was that sort of kid that, for example, I'd always sit in the corner of the class and wait for the day to be over, and I'd be that kid that would know the answer to the question but not put my hand up because I was afraid of being judged. And all of that does stem from my childhood. Being in certain situations throughout my childhood left me scarred with this perception that everybody saw the world in color and I just saw it in black and white. There was just some missing puzzle piece about me. I felt like everybody had this sense of communication or connection with each other. Like everybody's energies were just able to connect with each other perfectly, and I just wasn't there. There was just something about me that distincted me from the rest. And it left me scarred with it gave me this idea, and I held this idea for a large part of my primary and high school life, that I was just wired differently, that I belonged to something else, so to speak. So that's what made marijuana so intriguing for me personally, and that's why I continue to use it over an extended period of time. And I will admit it did, to an extent, consume me. It made me into an unproductive creature for a while. But throughout this video, I'm not going to be using the word addiction, because I feel like an addiction is where you can't really control something, or when you really want to stop something but you can't. You have absolutely no control of the substance or whatever that you're using. This wasn't necessarily the case for me. I did have control over it. There were many times throughout my marijuana journeys where I stopped for weeks, for months, for tolerance breaks. And I took breaks from marijuana, so I did have control over it, but I just didn't have the willpower to give it up. I felt like I had more to gain by continuing to use it than by stopping it. So that's why that's why it was so intriguing for me personally, because I was always seeking to escape. You know, I was always seeking to just like go into my own world and escape. So it just sort of fit the bill perfectly for me. I know other people who like would smoke weed once and never want to do it again. But yeah, it worked very well for me. So I really don't know where else to start apart from the beginning, and that is when I first smoked marijuana. I had just returned to school. It was year 12. I had returned for the first time after being away for about 6 months after dealing with certain mental health problems, and I had returned. And as I said, you know, I had a very, very small social circle. I had very select few friends. And one day I got invited to a marijuana gathering, a marijuana smoking session, which is basically a very low-class, low-key way of smoking marijuana. You know, like a bunch of high school kids would like get a Gatorade bottle and a hose, and they'd like rip bongs from that, and it would be a very like low-key thing or way to do it. They'd usually meet up at like an abandoned house or a park or something. But you know, considering I had like very little friends, I took every little invite or every little invitation I got to a gathering or whatever as an opportunity that couldn't be missed. So I went to this thing, and that was my first time smoking marijuana, and to be honest, I didn't feel a single thing, like nothing at all. I don't know why exactly that was. I think, you know, looking back, I think it's because my willpower to stay sober overrided my, you know, my ability to get high, because I knew I was amongst a lot of people in which I have to interact with pretty much every day. I cared about my reputation and how I was perceived by these people, so I didn't want to like go too far out there and make an ass out of myself and embarrass myself. So I was really committed to just sort of stay grounded and stay sober. I compare it to like the movies where there's the demon and the angel, and the angel sort of hold you back. Like that's how it was. Like I was sort of just, I just had a very strong willpower to stay grounded and not do anything stupid. But I really didn't feel anything the first time I smoked it. I pretended to be high just to simply fit in with those around me who were probably actually high and who were actually feeling the effects of marijuana. But me personally, I didn't feel a thing. But that day, it just sort of sparked this curiosity within me to know like what marijuana would be like if I was to try it in a solitary setting, if I was to try it in a proper way where it would actually kick in. So I think that's what really just sparked this curiosity to want to start. And you know, a couple of weeks went by, a couple of months went by, and eventually I got invited to another one of these marijuana gathering sessions. It was still with high school peers, so my will to stay sober overrided the substance, so to say. Like I just really had a strong willpower to just stay grounded and stay sober and not do anything stupid. So once again, I went to another one of these things, didn't really feel anything from it, sparked even more curiosity within me. I went to another one, same story. So one day I decided, fuck it, I'm gonna do this properly, okay? I'm done doing this shit through Gatorade bottles and ripping hoses off people's front lawns and doing all this like childish nonsense. I made the decision that one day due to the curiosity that was sparked, due to the past marijuana experiences that I had, I made the decision that I'm going to do this shit on my own in a proper environment, in a decent way, and I want to actually feel this shit. I want to know what it's like. So one day, it was one night actually, I waited for my parents to go to sleep, and if you're familiar with the marijuana smoking world, you would know that there are various ways of inhaling marijuana. You can do it through a bong, you can do it through a joint, you can do it through a blunt. In this particular session of mine, it was a solitary session, and I was doing it through a joint. And I was doing it through the large king-sized joint. That was the first time I had smoked it, and man oh man, did it kick in. Did it kick in and a fucking half. Like, I cannot begin to describe how bizarre the entire experience was. It was definitely nothing to what I was imagining. My expectations going into this thing were like, oh, I'm gonna get red eyes, I'm gonna have like desires to eat pizza and McDonald's, I'm gonna get relaxed and faded and sort of be like how they are in the movies and in the memes and shit. It was anything but that. Like, let me tell you, my God, excuse me. It was anything but that. I remember like during like a quarter way through it, I was like, fuck it, I need to back out of this. This paranoia just got out of control. I took my imaginative thoughts so literally, and I felt like my imagination came to life, and I wasn't used to anything like this previously in my life, so it just sort of took me by surprise, and I got very, very scared, very paranoid. My inner critic just sort of like burst out of me. Like I remember criticizing myself a lot while I was under the influence of this, and I think that's what made me want to back out of the trip so badly. Like, oh, why did I do this way? Why did I do that way? Oh, I humiliated myself this day, or this person thinks I'm stupid, or whatever. And like my inner critic would just like burst out. And once again, I just take my imagination and I take my thoughts way too literally. And it did get the best of me. And I made a concerted effort that day to not let my parents know, which is why I waited for them to go to sleep before I smoked. But I was legitimately on the verge of going to my mother and telling her, look, Mother, I've smoked a drug, I've done something stupid. I need you to call an ambulance, because I legitimately thought I was going to die. Like, I legit thought I was going to die. It was definitely nothing like what I was expecting. It was very intense, very harsh. But after about like 30 minutes after the trip, I drank lots of water, I washed my face a couple of times, and about 30-40 minutes after it kicked in, I started to feel the effects of it a little bit. Like, I started to feel that relaxation, I started to feel that feeling of being in a meditative state of mind, and it was fucking beautiful. And at the time, obviously, I had pretty much like no tolerance, so it hit me so hard, and I was feeling the effects of it so intensely, like it was unbelievable. And I remember I was watching a particular movie. It was the third sequel of Psycho, and I remember watching that movie and feeling like I'm in the movie. Like it just gave me, I felt like, as I said before, like it just brings out your inner critic. And I remember watching that movie thinking I'm like the best movie critic in the world, and I feel like every movie out there has like this hidden Easter egg or this hidden message within it. I wouldn't usually be able to spot these things from a sober state of mind, but when I would watch movies while under the influence of marijuana, it's like I'd spot these things like fully, and I'd be able to understand the movie almost as if I was the director or the writer of the movie, like I was watching it from the director's point of view. So it was a very cross thing with movies. I love smoking weed and watching movies at the same time. And obviously after that I smoked weed many times again, but at that point I came to the realization that it best works when I'm alone. So if I want to actually feel this shit and feel that magic, I have to do it when I'm alone. So I did it a couple of other times when I was when I was by myself, and I had more solitary sessions with marijuana. And as obviously the more my tolerance grew, the less the paranoia got. So I would get less anxious, less paranoid thoughts. I'd actually get more comfortable, and it got to the point where I was actually starting to feel the effects of marijuana and feeling the high, so to say, and I was actually beginning to enjoy it and not wanting to back out of trips anymore. And it became very fun. Like during the first period of time when I started smoking it, it was one of the funnest fucking things ever. Like I loved, for example, just sitting in my car like on a really cold, rainy day and just closing all my windows. And I'm not trying to boast or anything, but I don't drive no shitbox. So my car has like very comfortable leather seats. It has a TV monitor in there, so I'd like kick it back, in my car for literally like hours and hours on end, just smoking marijuana, just being in my own world, indulging in my own world. And that was a very intriguing thing. Like I loved doing that. I remember once I was watching, this is another time, but I was watching the same movie Psycho. This was actually the first sequel of the movie I cannot begin to describe how many times I've watched that movie while under the influence of marijuana. I don't know why, but that movie in particular just felt so real when I would watch it when I was under the influence. But I was watching it while under the influence of one day, and I was watching the famous shower scene where Norma Bates, if you don't know what it is, you should. I'm not even going to begin to explain it. But it's basically where Norma Bates opens the shower curtain and stabs Marion Crane repeatedly. And I was in my car, sedated out of my mind, and I remember as that was happening, you know, the world around me was completely disappeared. I was just in my own world, man, having the fucking time of my life. And when that stabbing scene happened, I felt like I was in the movie. And I remember as, like, sorry for being, like, explicit, but I remember, like, as the knife was going through, it's like I felt it. It felt so real. And I remember, like, as it was happening, I, like, jumped out of my car, like, ripped off my shirt and, like, checked my chest, checked my stomach to see if there were actually, like, knife wounds there. And I got extremely scared because I thought it was, like, real. Like, I forgot that I was watching the movie. I thought I was in the movie. Another thing that it did that was very interesting was it gave me a strong spiritual insight on a lot of things in ways that I can't even begin to, like, describe. Like, the things, you know, what people don't tell you about certain substances is what you learn on these things is incredible. Like, I cannot begin to describe how much spiritual guidance and just general knowledge I had gained due to marijuana. And to be honest, I don't even know if I would be on YouTube if it wasn't for my marijuana experience, because a lot of the things that I learned were due to my experience with marijuana and my time with marijuana. Like, it gave me a huge spiritual insight on things and just general knowledge. I call it the gateway to the truth. Like, there would be many times where I would smoke marijuana and I'd feel like I'd see these underlying fabrics of reality for a brief moment, and, like, I'd get the truth for, like, a brief moment. And you know, like, there were many just undescribable, spiritual, miraculous things. I'm sure, like, you know, when I mean, like, deja vu sort of moments that I can't really describe with words, but it wouldn't have happened without marijuana. And it definitely affected my spiritual life in a very severe way. Like, it just did shit to my heart, and unbelievable. Like, there were times, like, for example, I'd be smoking weed, I'd close my eyes, trying to, like, back out of a trip sometimes when I'd get very paranoid. And I remember, like, as I was closing my eyes, my expectation was that it would relax me, it would ease the tension, it would ease the anxiety, it would ease the paranoia. But I remember, like, as I was closing my eyes, I would see, like, these pyramids, and I'd see, like, the writing on the wall in ancient Egypt for, like, a brief moment, and I'd see the pyramids of Giza and why they were built and what they were built to represent. And it's like, for a brief moment, I felt like I could see these underlying fabrics of reality, even though my eyes were closed this entire time. And then when I'd open my eyes, I'd just green out and vomit everywhere, as if I had just came out of a fucking roller coaster or something, or, like, just finished bungee jumping or something. Like, it was very intense and very indescribable. But there were many times throughout my marijuana experience where I had these, like, spiritual moments that I just, I can't even begin to describe them. Like, to be honest, it was the most bizarre thing ever. But this was all happening during the first part, or during, like, the middle part of when I was experimenting with marijuana. And I was using it a lot, by the way. Like, I was not, like, a casual smoker. Like, I was indulging on this shit. There were many times where I would binge and it would turn me into this unproductive beast, so to speak. But, you know, eventually it got to the point where the magic of marijuana wasn't really working for me anymore. It got to a point where I was still enjoying it. I still loved eating. I still loved watching Netflix. I still loved feeling the effects of marijuana. But it got to the point where I would smoke it and I just feel, you know, the magic was gone. Like, I just feel like I had some sort of psychoactive substance in my body, in my system. But other than that, I didn't really feel too much more. Like, the magic was gone. And that's when the thoughts of quitting started to occur. That's when I realized that this shit really isn't benefiting me that much and it's time to stop. because considering the amount of time, money and energy I was putting into it, I really wasn't getting much out of it at this point. It became almost like a chore, or almost like smoking cigarettes. You know, like cigarette smokers don't really want to do it, but it's just like something to do. And that's what it became eventually, and I didn't really like it anymore. And the reason I continued to use it and not quit instantly when that, you know, that started happening was because of the withdrawals, to be honest, was because I was just very afraid of suffering from the withdrawals. So there was a long period of time where I would continue to smoke just to not go through the withdrawals. But at this point, after all of that, you know, the gateway to the truth, after all of these spiritual lessons and guidances which I was given, after the magic has gone, it has been, you know, a while since I've smoked marijuana. Then, you know, I wasn't feeling anything. And this is not an exaggeration, but there were times where I would smoke legitimately like 2 grams or 3 grams to myself and barely feel a thing. And, you know, like I just get a little bit hungry, I get a little bit tired, but I wasn't feeling it anymore. You know, I wasn't having any fun with it anymore. And that was when I decided that it's definitely time to stop this. I want to stop this. But as I said, I was just way too scared for the withdrawals. As, you know, as intriguing as it was, and as much as it did bring some sort of color to my life, because as I mentioned earlier in the video, I was scarred and left with a perception that I saw the world in black and white, and I felt like marijuana brought color to my life to an extent. I still needed to stop, and for a while I prolonged it until one day, I remember one day I was smoking. It was actually, usually I would smoke in my car by myself, but this time I was in my backyard and I was smoking a particular strain. And I remember when I was smoking it, I went into the shower after it, and the last time I smoked marijuana, by the way, it wasn't like a dedicated moment of I need to stop this. It just sort of happened. Like I just sort of had like a very brutal, rude awakening, and I was able to see my life from like a different perspective for a very brief period of time. So I remember I was smoking this certain strain. I went into the shower. As I was rubbing my head, you know, as the water was like falling down on me, I remember having like this brief moment of like, I don't even know what to call it. It was just like this brief moment of awakening where I was able to see my life from the perspective of somebody else who was actually living life normal. And it's like this entire time I never knew that I was just trapped in a fucking box. And once again, this day, it was just like a normal day of smoking. Like I was planning on smoking the next day, the next week. You know, I had no... like I was planning on continuing to do it, but after this experience that I had, like it was so indescribable. It was about 15 seconds. Literally I was in the shower and I felt like for a brief moment like my spirit left my body, and I just had like this out of body experience. As I was like scraping my head, I felt like it wasn't my head. Like, you know, that feeling where like you just, your sense of pain is just completely numbed. It was one of them moments, and it gave me this brutal, rude awakening that I've been trapped in a box this whole time, and I never even, oh, excuse me. Oh, what the fuck is wrong with me? But it just gave me this brutal, like rude awakening that this whole time I've been trapped in a box and I never really knew. And I just came to the realization of how badly this shit consumed me. And it was at that point where I just made the decision, just straight up, I'm done. You know, I had more marijuana. You know, I did have more marijuana on me at the time, but my desire to smoke at that point was like just completely diminished, and I threw away, I think it was like $100 worth of marijuana, which was a stupid decision. But to be honest, like I was just so, like my desire to quit was so strong, like I just didn't give a fuck about anything. All I wanted to do was just stop and go out into the world and start exploring again. And it also made me very emotional. I remember just going into my room and just crying and like thinking how much I neglected my family, how much time, money and energy I spent on this shit, and like, yeah, it was at that point where I was done, and I haven't touched weed since, to be honest. I don't see myself smoking weed anytime soon either. But yeah, like that was pretty much when I was done. but it did have a very strong impact on my spiritual life as well. Like as I said earlier in the video, I mean, if it wasn't for a lot of the insights and a lot of the knowledge in which I gained throughout my marijuana experience, I don't think I would be on YouTube, because I did gain lots of spiritual lessons and guidances, and you just learn shit on marijuana that you don't learn like anywhere else. But when I was actually done, you know, the withdrawals, by the way, were fucking horrible. That's a video involved in its own. Like, the withdrawals just turned me into this complete monster. But I remember like doing things like just going outside, going to the park, spending time in nature. It just became like the funnest thing in the world. It became very therapeutic. You know, I had a very strong desire to just look after my health, take care of my body. And my life did improve from there. You know, instead of spending all of my time, money and energy on a substance that's just going to give me a temporary feeling of pleasure, I was actually using it on productive things. You know, I was investing on, like, for example, this camera, in which I can use to give myself a platform and give myself a voice. I was investing it in other things in which I can use to further benefit myself on a spiritual level and on a mental level. And my money and time and energy was being spent on more useful and productive things. And yeah, like it was just incredible. Like, the whole journey was incredible. Yeah, like, me and Mary Jane have had quite a story. Not many people know about it, but I really just wanted to get it out there. Can marijuana be used? Like, I just want to finish off this video by saying, can marijuana be used as a tool to further broaden one's spiritual sense and understanding? Fucking oath, hell yeah, 100%. I'm not going to sit here and lie. It definitely can teach you a lot of things and give you an insight on yourself, and change your perception in a very positive way, and it can alter your spiritual perspective and your spiritual life in a very significant way, which is what it did for me. But I guess ultimately it is subjective. It does work differently for everybody. Like, as I said, some people would smoke weed once and never want to do it again. For me, I loved it just simply because I always had like this desire to escape, you know, going back to my childhood, as I explained before. So I definitely think that marijuana and psychedelics can be used as tools to improve one's spiritual well-being. So yeah, I really don't know what else to add to this video. I spoke about my experience from when I started, how it affected my spiritual life, how fun it was, and towards the end, how bad it became. But yeah, like, ultimately, if I could go back, would I do it again? Yes, I would, because it did teach me lots of valuable lessons, and it did change my perception, for me personally, subjectively, in a very positive light. So yeah, like, I really don't know what else to say. If you enjoyed this video, subscribe to my channel. I'm going to be linking all of my social links in the description, so be sure to follow me on there, specifically on Instagram, because I'm more active on there than anywhere else. And yeah, if you want to see more content from me, subscribe. Peace and take care.